Hey, Baba. Thank you all for coming. It's really exciting to see how many faces here. And we're thrilled to have Bill here again. Every year that he comes, we just warms up the store with his stories, and we adore him.
Nice to have it cool.
Yeah. And we have all of Bill's. Bill has 6 books. He's got them up here in case he wants to talk about them, but I have them over there. I also wanted to tell people that we just got in Slave of Love, Bob Mossman's biography. So that's exciting. Of Duncan. Not an autobiography. And also wanted to make sure everybody knows that same time next week we're going to have Ward Parks here, and he's talking about life after the Mandali as Baba lovers. So that's the topic of his talk. So we hope to see you all next week too.
I think the topic is basically that life is over.
So, without further ado, our friend Bill LePage. Jay Bob.
Jay Bob. Enjoy it while you got it.
Jay Baba. In preparing to come here and coming here, I was thinking again what a wonderful little institution this bookstore is. What a treasure it has been for us in Australia, for example. I don't know to what extent it's patronised here, but to us it's been wonderful. The books are always. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. The books are available, and when we come here, I'm amazed at the range of photographs and CDs and DVDs and other books. Mind you, I wouldn't mind if it was only mine, but I have to accept a little competition. But no, I really. And in talking about this, I mean, I know that it stems originally from Andy Lesnick and Sheila.
And what's her name?
But I mean that was the basis. But I must say that the woman that's been here for the years that I can remember, I don't know how long it is with Laura, but she's top first class.
Yay!
No, and I really mean that in terms of the promptness with which she does it, and you know the orders. I know it's been wonderful.
Give her a raise.
Of course, I mean, it's all self-interest, I mean, I keep hoping that she'll plug my books more. Actually, one of the things that's come out recently that has fascinated Dana and myself, and particularly myself, because perhaps I'll explain, is this new DVD, I Am the One Reality. It's a wonderful little film done by Buzz and Wendy, Connor. Oh, anyway, of course you know them, and it's so fascinating. In seeing it, and then I started to sort of read what I could about Portofino, that month that they spent there. I'm not talking about the Nasic, I'm talking about the Portofino section of the film. And then it started me thinking about the contrast, but the way Baba was in those times. God, no wonder the women fell in love with him. They couldn't help it. Yeah, it was so beautiful, absolutely. And then the contrast to that, for me, in meeting him in 1954 in the 3 Incredible Weeks. Okay, the women had a month in Portofino. We only got 3 weeks, and I must say that, you know, but all right. I just finished that thought was how incredibly handsome Mayor Barber was in '54, but not only handsome. He was handsome, but what struck me personally was he was a man's man. He was one that I said, yeah, okay, I'll follow this fellow. You know, now the contrast when I saw the DVD, the contrast. He was very much a women's man, if you know what I mean. And then in '54, for me, he was a man's man. And so it sent me back to reading again about '54 and the contrast with the '30s, for example, Portofino. By the way, I came across an interesting little anecdote talking about Portofino. I searched round whatever could be found. There's not that much. Not that much. The most comprehensive is probably Gene Adriel's in Avatar. But there's also a bit reported in the Glow given by Pendu, who got it from Kaka. And that was Elizabeth Patterson arranged the rental of that house in Portofino for the month. She wasn't told, and of course she didn't know, but it turned out to be haunted. And there were disturbances during that part of that time.
Bill, are you talking about Alta Chiara or
Yeah.
Capodimonte?
Yeah.
Alta Chiara.
Alta Chiara.
Right. And I've forgotten the names.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And yes, and so what this was told by Kaka to Pendu, who told Stephen Klein. It's all right. I mean, it doesn't matter to you, but I was intrigued, you know. And the story was that Barber had the room upstairs, and there was a flight of stairs from his room down directly to the back door of the house. And one night, Kaka was, of course, night watchman with Barber. Barber always had somebody there, and he was there with Barber, and then all of a sudden, Barber, in the middle of the night, Barber got up, and without putting on chappals, without any further clothing, I don't know what the temperature was, but he just got straight out of bed, down the stairs, and Kaka followed him, and then Barber went out the door and disappeared into the night. And at that point, Kaka felt, oh, he's doing something. I'll just stay put and wait. And after some minutes, Barber returned and proceeded back up the stairs to his bed. And Kaka, in going there, Barber said, Barber, you know, I was worried about you going out without chappals. You know, you might have hurt your feet. And Barber said he was a good soul. He was a good man. I'm sorry. No, he first of all said, I have released that spirit. He was a good man, but he defied God. And he was without a body for 500 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought it was a warning to me. I hastily sort of thought, if I defied God somehow. Yeah. Anyway, a fascinating little anecdote. Yeah, and but what was also so intriguing to me was the contrast with how Barber was with the women during that month and how he was with us over the 3 weeks. Over the month, there was a lot of time spent walking down to the beach, playing games, exchanging jokes, and frequent little episodes of conflict between this one and that one. It's so interesting, the contrast of what was reported, and the only episode that I know of in the 3 incredible weeks was Lud Dimple was upset because one of the men, one of the other Americans obviously, put his suitcase on his bed.
Joseph Hart.
It was a Joseph Hart.
Yeah.
Oh, typical. Yeah, but that's the only little episode that I knew of. Otherwise, we were occupied with an incredible series of discourses on the planes of consciousness, the miracles, Barber's life. It seemed to be such a difference to what I read of the Portofino visit, where Barber was preparing. I mean, this is my supposition. What do I know? But to me, it seemed to me that he was particularly preparing Elizabeth and Kitty and Norina. Was Norina there?
Yes.
Yeah, I suppose must. I don't remember particularly mention of her. But I mean, to me, women are naturally more conscious of household, of preparing what the centre could be. You could regard it as a big home. It's Barber's home in the West, and to me it was interesting that there was those early years with the women. There were very few men involved, and of the men, again, very few continued. Herbert dropped away, Quinton dropped away, various others that I've forgotten the names, but they didn't continue. And the contrast again with the men, it was that we weren't the least concerned about preparing a home for Barber. We were assailed with the whole concept of the process of creation, the evolution of consciousness and the involution of consciousness. It was all heady stuff. It just, I don't know whether, but to me it's so interesting that the contrast between the two periods. And I mean, for example, of course, this involved Herbert, but this seemed to be typical. Barber suddenly said, "Let's go for a walk down to the." They went for a walk, and then at a certain point he said, "Let's go down to the beach," pointing in a certain direction. And Herbert said, "Oh, Barber, this is private property, and the owner might turn up. I mean, the proper Englishman, very conscious, and his sister Kitty said, "Let's go anyway." I mean, in other words, let's go. And Herbert, of course, reacted and went off in a huff. And what was interesting was that they went down to the beach and walked along the beach, and apparently there was a certain man, I think he was elderly if I remember, who was it was noticed that he would watch Barbara. Nothing was said. There's no contact, but he was there and as it were lingered while Barbara was there. And apparently he was a replica in a sense, very similar to a man that Herbert was supposed to contact in Moscow when he was sent by Barbara to travel across through Siberia, through Russia. And because Herbert had gone off in a huff, he had a lot of trouble finding that man. Yeah, anyway, but it was typical apparently of the huffs and puffs that went on. Another one was Minta, Diana, Delia's sister, and she really was trying to become Barbara's Mara, and every time Barbara would sit down calling the group to him, she would immediately take a cushion and sit next to him. And this was fine until on one occasion she was called out of the room, and when she came back in, somebody else sat on her cushion. She was furious and stormed out of the room, you know. I love it. We men never did that. Yeah. All right. Anyway, I can recommend. It's a beautiful DVD, and of course to go with that, you might like to study the two things. I thought of that. Yeah. You could also then, in contrast to that DVD, I Am the One Reality, you could buy May Barbara's Call on the 3 Incredible Weeks, and the other DVD,
Bob
Frederick's one, 3 Incredible Weeks. That's what it's called, and what of course is particularly good about that is that it has my voice.
You're showing that on the center on Silence Day. Will you
That's
be speaking?
Anyway, no, I mean, but the two films on the 3 Incredible Weeks, there's good footage of Barbara in both of them, and beautiful footage of Barbara in the 30s, 1933, and Barbara floating down those stairs. You know the shot of Barbara at the head of the stairs. It's a famous one, the flight of stairs here, and he's standing at the top, and there's trees and foliage around. But in the film, he walks down, and his hair's flowing, and the sadra's flowing. It's very beautiful. Well, what do I talk about now? I mean, one of the thoughts that I did have again in coming here is how fortunate we are, how incredibly fortunate we are to have books. I was so glad that I got hold of the recording of Male One talking about his life with Barbara, which of course included the family so much, Erich, Guy, Manu, and so forth, and then I chased other people. I wish now that I'd started much earlier, because by the time I got onto this idea, a lot of them had gone and died. They should have waited. Because really it was so wonderful. But again, what an incredible contrast to other Advents, for example, with particularly that I know of with Islam, with Muhammad. He gave out the Quran and it was memorized. As it was given out, they immediately remembered it, and it's recorded how people would remember long poems. They might only hear them once or twice, long epic poems of the deeds of the Arab warriors and whatnot. Wonderful, wonderful stories. Anyway, the contrast, of the minds of then, how the heart was much more open, or perhaps you could say the mind was less cluttered. Now there's so much noise in the world. Talking about science.
They didn't have Facebook and Twitter then. True, and not only that, but so many other things. I mean, the whole aspect of the internet, the whole business of films and recordings, music, and so. Our minds are such that it seems that, I know, I have to confess that I don't remember things that Barbara said to me. I mean, there were certain things that were written down. In '54, thank goodness it was written down. What Barbara had said to me after I'd been in the what was called the dome in those days, the tomb, which became, of course, the Samadhi. But, for example, Barbara, when I was driving him, and Barbara had said right in the beginning when we first set off, "All right, Bill, you're a good driver, but keep your eyes on the road," because of course Barbara was seated alongside me, and I had a look as I went along. Yeah, and on one occasion, it's in this book, to tell you the key, but you might remember it. When I was driving, and I was being very conscientious and I had both hands on the wheel. I was concentrating, as it were, and I must say that it was wonderful driving, Barbara. There was little conversation, very little indeed, but there was such an atmosphere in the car that you never felt the need or the lack of conversation or anything to break the silence that there was. It was a silence that was not like an ordinary silence, not like a silence where after a while
you start to think perhaps I should say something. But there was none of that. How wonderful it is that we have these books, and we have the DVDs, we have CDs, we have pictures, we have so many photographs of Barbara and films of Barbara, and yet the that can be a help and can also be a distraction in the sense that how will I put it? Mind you, in 1954, Barbara at one point said, okay, for half an hour from 9 o'clock to 9:30 each morning, you are to sit up by yourselves with your eyes shut. In other words, sit isolated from each other, and hold Barbara's figure in your mind. And he did say, if that is impossible, you can hold a picture in front of you. But the interesting thing, the difficulty of holding that figure, of holding that image, and for myself, it just shows the agitated state of my mind. It doesn't stay for more than a moment. I hold the image, and then it's gone, and so forth. And all I'm saying is that life can be so wonderful, and yet at the same time prevent one from becoming still within oneself, so that one can stay with him to such an extent that one perhaps buries a few sanskaras, burns out a few sanskaras, however one could put it. Yeah.
I felt like you were almost about to get into it, but then you changed the tack. Remember how you just recently read something in The Awakener about Bob saying that he felt a bit strange?
Oh.
Such a
Oh,
good
yeah,
story.
that was... It seems incredible, but it's only after nearly 60 years that I suddenly realised how sweet Barbara was. In I've told you, about me sitting in the samadhi, in the tomb,
Yeah.
and how impossible I find it to be able to describe my experience. Does anyone not? Yeah. Oh well. Anyway, let me say it. Barbara suddenly, in the midst of a discourse, he suddenly pointed like this to myself and the other young Australian, John Ballantyne. These two lads have a love for truth, and then he directed that we were to sit in what was called in those days the Dome. We were to sit there for at midnight for half an hour. We were to sit still, not move, have our eyes open, and inwardly take his name. and Barbara said that if we did that for 7 nights, that we were to do it for 7 nights, and at the end of 7 nights, we might get a glimpse of Barbara, which didn't mean anything to me. I didn't even know what. I didn't think about it at all. I just said yes. In other words, whatever Barbara said, directed that I should do, I did to what, as much as I could, and so okay, I did it. Francis, we went down. We went to the
the tomb, and
At midnight.
at midnight, what a hand. And the windows, of course, were shut, and then the door was shut. Now, Mehrabad in those days was absolutely there was no electricity. It was completely silent. There were no cars, no animals. There was it was a complete contrast to Mehrabad now, when there's things happening all the time, and watchmen and whatnot. And the door, when the doors were shut, I sat on the right side with my legs down in the crypt where Barbara's body subsequently lay, and I just sat like this, as I always do, and I didn't move, and I did keep my eyes open, but I was unable to take his name. It was as though I was stunned inside. There was not a chink of light. There was no light, no sound, nothing. All I was aware of was blackness, and complete. And of course, not that I mean, I can say that now. I mean, obviously there was that the atmosphere of the periods of seclusion that Barbara spent there, the fasting and seclusion. But all I was aware of was the impact of this blackness, and the atmosphere was such that I was, all I can say is I was stunned, and I wasn't able to say his name. And all right, the next morning, Barbara came in, and this is what I just read. It's in the, you'll find in the bookstore. The 3 Incredible Weeks, written by Purdom and Schloss. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and is it Schloss?
No,
what is it?
Schloss.
Whatever it is. Sorry, you're misleading me. What it was so funny was Barbara comes in and he sits. We were sitting. Barbara said, "Today I have a funny feeling." He said, there are times when I can't explain the things that the things that I'm feeling, and that's just what I said. I didn't say that I can't explain. Barbara then Barbara said there were a couple of other things reported, and then he turned to us and said, "Did you sit? And what happened?" And I said, "How?" He asked the reaction, and I said, I had a funny feeling." Isn't that amazing? I mean, how beautiful of Barbara to sort of say, "It's okay, you can have a funny feeling." In other words, it sounded so stupid just to say, "I had a funny feeling." But isn't that beautiful of Barbara?
Yeah, so compassionate.
Yeah. And isn't it funny? It's taken me 58 years to realise it.
And then what he said.
And then he said, "Where are my glasses?"
Barbara wore glasses.
Did Barbara say, "Where are my glasses"?
Wait a minute.
No.
Do I might have them. Here you go.
I was just thinking that it's a nice little message. Okay,
Bill? Yeah.
And thank you. Yes, see, okay, wait a minute, let me find it. There are so many things. Yeah. I said the next morning my mind was chaotic and I was not able to blurt out more than a few words to Barber when he asked me what I felt in the tomb. I tried to say something about the panic that I had experienced in the pit of my stomach and then managed to say, "My heart pounded all the time and I could not say your name." "What was there to frighten you?" asked Barber. Again I stammered something about images of the outside world, or the lack of them. In other words, yeah. Barber then asked if we were prepared to carry out what he'd asked for 7 nights. We said yes. By the way, John Ballantyne, the other young man, said, he said, I just felt there was no ventilation in the room, in the tomb. That he felt nothing, and I've always felt that I felt at the beginning, at the beginning that this was it was for me, and the culmination, if you like, of this was that in 1967, Barber called me over to India to stay with him for 2 weeks at Mayrazad. And the night, I spent 1 night in Bombay before travelling the next day to Mayrazad. And that night I lay awake for hours. I don't remember the details, but the point was that I felt that panic that I felt then in '54, and I was experiencing, you could say, in a very inarticulate way, what some musts have said when they were asked to come to Barber, and they've said, no, he means trouble. And it was interesting. In other words, what it meant to me then in '54 and again in '67, although it was intensified in '67 in the sense that I knew this was that my stay with Barber in Mayrazad with him was different from a darshan program or a sahavas. This was a different thing altogether. I sensed that. But what was interesting is that it's the fear of the unknown, the fear of the loss, of stepping into the unknown. Hey, if I do this, where am I going? What's happening? Do you follow what I mean? So it's a frightening. It wasn't when Barber said, "What was there to frighten you?" It wasn't physical fear. I didn't have nothing like that occurred. And then, but how beautiful what he said. Barber replied, "Do not be frightened. There is nothing to fear. Don't force your attention." That's which is interesting, isn't it? Don't force your attention. It becomes mental. Just be relaxed when you're thinking of Barber. Keep awake and don't move. Even if a snake crosses your legs, let it pass by. And love Barber during the half hours. Fear means there is no love. Think of Barber from the bottom of your hearts. After 7 nights you will have a glimpse of Barber. Why this fear? Francis of Assisi and Francis of Xavier loved Christ with all their might, and what they suffered none of you could guess, but fear was foreign to them. Do not fear, love me. Don't be troubled, think of Barbara and be happy. But it was such a beautiful message, and sort of had lots of things to think about and to ponder on. It also reminds me of a little story that I remember reading somewhere about the Buddha. The Buddha saying, he's talking about before enlightenment, and he would be in the forest meditating, and the great fear would come upon him, and he would continue to meditate. And he would be walking in the forest, and the great fear would come upon him, and he would continue to walk.
Wow.
The important thing was the endurance of going on. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, is there any?
Bill, did you do the 7 nights?
No, oh, I'm sorry. No. So we said yes, of course. We said, well, there was no question in my mind I wouldn't have gone on. But, and okay, the second night, I started to be able to take his name. And I was starting to get settled in. And I said this to Barbara. I said, I'm something stupid like, I'm better, Barbara. And Barbara just cancelled it. So I never got that glimpse of Barbara.
Maybe the first night was the glimpse.
I don't know. Anyway, it's. But the interesting thing is that fear means no love, and love means no fear. And it's impossible, of course. That was the beginning of all my vaunted knowledge of, my intellectual knowledge of Barbara and the discourses and the sutras of Buddha and the New Testament I'd sort of reread. I was tackling Barbara on this had to be sorted out. I mean, if Jesus has come again now, this was not to be taken lightly. and it went poof, it just disappeared in the face of the impact of the atmosphere of that tomb. And then that was when I gradually, I'm thick, it takes me time, but I gradually realised more and more that if one does take seriously the attempt to live in a way pleasing to him, to think of him rather than of oneself, and whatever one is going through, it's only love that can take you through, that can enable you to do it. And as I've often said, all I can say, and I'd say it again, that it's not a matter of, well, that fixes that, it can be done. But what is clear is that Barbara does help. That if you make the effort, if you just take that step towards and say, all right, Barbara, I'll swallow that anger, I'll swallow that resentment, I'll swallow that unjust accusation or action or whatever, or I I know very well that it won't be good if I have that second piece of chocolate cake. So I disciplined myself, and Barbara enabled one to say, yeah, all right, I can survive without it. I mean, all I'm saying is that my experience is that it's beautiful the way in which Barbara is with one. Any attempt that one makes, he responds to. When you even think that it won't be, there's always that sort of blankness, as though, God, I don't know, where am I? That if you endure, if you go on, then something breaks through. I mean, Barbara breaks through. Well,
I think Erich once said life with Barbara was just one humiliation after another.
yeah.
Did you experience any of that?
A little hint here and there. Yeah. He gave me two things which have been the greatest blessings, and in both cases, one was, do what Francis tells you, and him living with us for 3.5 years, wife and 3 young children. And the other one was, which I was thrilled at the end of '67. I mean, not only had he emphasised again very strongly about it, and then turned the key, a matter of spreading his message, but he said develop Avatar's abode as a place of world pilgrimage. I thought, that's fantastic. I mean, that's the sort of thing I like, something to get my teeth into. It was so funny. I mean, I can remember now. It's so vivid with me. Saying goodbye to Barbara. There was, by the way, which pleased me very much. There were no embraces in those 2 weeks I spent with Barbara. The only contact I had with Barbara, and that was also with any of the men Mundley. It wasn't just me. At least I can say that. There was no contact. It was work. It was work which I liked. And okay, I bowed to Barbara, and what I was conscious of was, good. It's wonderful. He's given me a job to do. I'll be sort of like, I had the sense of, well, I'll just go out and go round the corner and carry out what he wants, and then I'll be back with him, and he'll pat me on the back and say, good work, Bill. I mean, that was, I love the idea. Yeah, well, it's a matter of waiting. Anyway, both those jobs did result in a lot of humiliation and frustration. Yeah, and frustration in the sense that I haven't been able to carry out what I did have. I had a taste of carrying out, and then it was stopped, and it's taken me something like 30 years to live with and say it's in his hands. But more and more realise what a blessing it was.
Wow.
It's wonderful that that's how it worked out. Yeah. Anyway, is there anything? I don't know. I can talk about the books if you like. I mean, the sort of things that see, I love sort of, I was talking about the life of that Mayawan gave, the recordings that he did, and the sort of stories that I loved was, okay, in 19, 20, 27 or 28, something of that period, and Guy Mai and her two daughters, husband, Papa, Jessawalla, Guy Mai, and the two daughters. Erich must have been at school. There was no mention of Erich. But they were with Baba. And Baba said, now, on your return to Nagpur, when you go through Pune, make a point of paying your respects to Babajan. But not the two girls, not the two daughters. They were to be left. And Guy Mai was with her sister, Gulamasi. And okay, they went to, they reached Pune. They have to go to Pune to get the train then to Nagpur. They go approach Babajan, and they see Babajan surrounded by women, and she's balancing a coconut in her hand. And the women, the Indian women who are surrounding her, are all trying to edge forward in the hope that Babajan will give them that coconut, which means, given by a spiritual master, means a great blessing, whatever it may be. And so Guy Mai, who was quite shy, and Gulamasi wasn't, Guy Mai said, look, let's just pay our respects from here. And Gulamasi said, nothing, not on your sweet life. And she just ploughed her way through, much to the protests of the Indian women. They didn't like these intruders coming in, and okay, they both go. Guy Mai follows. They both go to Babajan and pay their respects, and all of a sudden, Guy Mai has the coconut, and there's a roar of protest from the women. and Guy Mai said to Gulamasi, "I'll give it to one of them." And Gulamasi said, "Not on you, definitely not. It's a great blessing." So, okay, they depart, and there's a funny sequel. It's not the part of the story, but Papa, who's waiting impatiently for this, he had no part. To him, Babajan was just an old woman, and he was respectful barely, but that was it. And he wanted a picnic in the gardens, in the Bund Gardens, before getting the train. So he gets them, and they collect food, and they set off, and they get to Bund Garden, and Papa can't believe it. In the meantime, before they got there, Babajan had got there, and there she was, surrounded with nothing but something, bakri, a cheap chapati, and probably chai. Anyway, she had refused to have anything that anyone start the food and the drink, and then all of a sudden she spots Guy Mai and Papa coming. Oh, my children have come, and Papa's furious. He wanted to go off and have a nice picnic by themselves, and now they've been drawn in, and of course she insists on them sitting there and being given chapatis and none of the goodies that he had bought, for the picnic. Anyway, that's beside it. Okay, so a bit of time passes, and Guy Mai becomes pregnant with Mayawan. And apparently the old Parsi woman doctor who was looking after her realised the baby was not in the right position,
and in order to manipulate it, I don't know about it, you know, but whatever it was, so she put her under anaesthetic. Guy Mai was under anaesthetic, and she manipulated so that the baby could be born properly. But under anaesthetic, what was so beautiful was that Guy Mai had a vivid dream, and the dream produced an intense feeling of joy. And she saw in the dream, she saw Baba Jan and Baba coming towards her, bearing a big egg, like an egg, and it was a baby boy, and they give it to her in the dream, and then they disappear. And so when it is said that when she came out of the anaesthetic, one of the nurses, sort of as a bit of a joke, said, "You had a girl," and she said, "Oh no, I had a boy." She knew, and that boy was Mayawan. And as I always say, you know, make a point, if you go to India, spend time with Mayawan. Baba pointed to him on one occasion and said, "There is one who is in the world but not of it." Wonderful person. Anyway, that's the sort of story that's in the book.
Great story.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And he would hate you saying that about him.
Oh yeah. For heaven's sake, don't tell him that. Don't say to him that I said that. I wrote that, and he said, "You can't." And I said, "But Baba said it." He said, "All right, say that I tended to be." He watered it down, and you'll find that. Isn't that beautiful? And this one I like particularly. It's a reprint of an earlier one, which was about 2/3 that size, and very badly printed in Bombay. Jim Mistry and I, it was the first book I did, and what I like about it is that I got John Borthwick, a young Baba lover at that time, to ask Erich questions about, you know, how much money should one earn? Should one try to improve oneself? How to bring up children? All sorts of questions about life and living.
With a tape recorder.
And of course there was tape recorded. I put him up to it. If I'd tried it, of course Eric would have snorted. But I tricked, you know, because Eric was only too happy to talk to the young ones. Anyway, and we've added some more material to that and made the larger imprint, and when we put it into John and Wendy's shops, they have a series of shops in Australia called Tree of Life. At one point they had 55 shops. It's come down. Things are grim, but anyway, that's the point is that this was put in, and within something like 7 months they'd sold 120 copies. I mean, and this is in Australia, where there's 22 million total population.
In a clothing store, really.
Yeah, in a clothing. Anyway, it's the idea was more colourful Baba books to attract the eye. Very retail. All right.
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? I mean, I can, yeah.
If you want to talk more about that humiliating time when Francis was living with you, you know, I mean, you alluded to how humiliating it was.
No, only in the sense that it well,
I had my pride, okay, and he was a dominant man, 17 years older than me, and the basis of the Barber movement. I had a respect for him because, which was, you know, how it should be, and of course, life with a wife and 3 children is bad enough without having his complication. Sorry, I mean it's a challenge. Yeah, and it was a greater challenge, but I was between, you could say, between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that I had to have him and the circs, and I couldn't leave Barber. And okay, at the end of 2 years, when Barber came in '56 to Australia, at one point he did have Francis and I embrace. I was glad that Barber recognised that Francis was at fault. Sort of justice. Yeah. But yes, and then that was a sort of the process of hardening one, of toughening one up. That's all. And I'm very grateful for Barber now, when you go through it. And as Eric says, you know, once you've been with Barber, all you want to do is be with him again. And that also is of course the part of that fear, the fear of the unknown. I mean, it's not always it's not a matter of, it's not really unknown. I mean, what gets me is the thought of going without my morning cup of tea. You know, I mean, this spiritual path is all right. I'm happy as long as it sort of, it suits me. And I have a strong feeling that that's not going to be the way it is.
The closer we get, the fewer cups of morning tea we're allowed to have.
Oh, I know.
The more watered down the tea
Don't laugh
gets.
about it.
The earlier it gets, it's 2 a.m. Here's your cup of watered down tea. We're getting ready to go on the road.
And you get a situation like the fact they've been travelling for days, and they've had little food, and they've been on the train, and they get to a station at about 5 a.m. They've had nothing, and they see the boy in a little distance along the station. They see a boy dusting the store with the fruit. He's uncovered it from the night, and getting ready for the day's trading, and a little to the side was a man praying in front of a photograph of Barber. And Barber says to Erich, go and get, we'll break our fast with an orange. So it was a matter of 6 oranges. There was Barber and must have been 5 Mundley. I seem to remember 6 oranges. And so Barber went, Erich went and bargained with the boy and got 6 oranges for the price of 5, and came back, and he was in just before any of them, before they could start, because Erich was first of all washing Barber's orange before giving it to him, and then the others would have started eating. The man comes rushing over
and says, and it sees Erich with the oranges and says, "You cheated my boy." And Erich says, "I didn't. I bargained with him, yes, but it was a legitimate transaction, and oh no, that I don't accept it." And what's so curious apparently is that Erich, without paying any attention to Barbara, could still sense what Barbara was conveying to him, to the line of argument. You know what I mean? It was a beautiful example of Erich, almost, I don't know how you'd put it, but sensing what Barbara wanted him to say. And Erich pointed out, "Look, this is the first transaction of the day. Make it let it be a good one. It'll set the situation for the rest of the day." No, and he insisted on taking the oranges back.
Oh,
And Barbara said, "Well, at least he prayed in my presence." But how he could have, what would have happened if he'd said, "Well, all right, have the oranges." Anyway, but that image of cold morning, nothing to eat, then the oranges are taken away, and I'm thinking, yeah, well, I don't know about this spiritual. All right, J. Barber.
Yeah.